I'm Naya, mom, boob nerd, board-certified lactation consultant, and lover of lipstick and curse words. I'm that weird Indian girl you knew in high school, all grown up.
And I'm Alexis, mom, birth nerd, and therapist plus doula, encouraging parents to hold joy plus what the fuck is this mess simultaneously. Some people think I'm too much, but those aren't my people.
And we are the Top Knot Squad.
TKS is a tiny little podcast about motherhood in real life, the good, the bad, the ugly AF.
Hosted by two women that are passionate about our beliefs and unafraid to speak our minds.
Friends that wanted to create space for all that ish we are too scared to talk about.
Are you ready to laugh, be vulnerable, and keep it real with us?
Top knots are not required.
If the Top Knot Squad content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/topknotsquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
Okay, so this is a part one of a two-part episode about our birth stories. We really hope you enjoy it.
On this episode of the Top Knot Squad, you'll hear our birth stories. Alexis and I are both postpartum and birth professionals, but we've realized we've never shared our full birth stories here on the podcast. So today, you get to hear both of ours. It's not even a twofer. It's like a fourfer because we each have two babies. So you get a fourfer of birth stories today on the Top Knot Squad.
And just a disclaimer, I know that both of our stories might have some tense, tough moments.
Mm-hmm.
So as always, take care of yourself. If it's too much to listen to, we understand. Step away.
Yeah.
Take care of your needs.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. This is our first episode this season without a guest. So it's just the two of us that you get to listen to this whole episode.
What am I going to say? No, I'm just kidding.
But it's good for us to kind of hear feedback, too, about, do you like us always having guests? Do you like just hearing the two of us? So we're mixing it up. And let us know what you think.
Yeah, we are always open to your feedback. You can email us or DM us on social media. We're probably a little too responsive. So go ahead and let us know what you think.
Yeah. So how are we going to do this?
I don't know. Should we tell maybe our oldest child's birth story first and then the second one?
Yeah.
The second one, the youngest ones. Yeah.
Do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
Whichever.
You go first.
Okay. All right. So for those of you that don't know, I have an 8.5-year-old. His name is Ethan. He was born a little bit early. He was born about 3.5 weeks early. So he was a late preterm baby. What was kind of crazy about my birth with him was that I actually had no idea that I was going to be having him the day that I had him. So I was going in for my 36-week visit, as one does, and I was birthing with a group of certified nurse midwives who had hospital privileges. This was in the Fort Worth area. If you are a listener from up there or you're familiar with the birth scene in Fort Worth, I'm sure you know exactly who I'm talking about. But I had a great experience with them, and I went in for my 36-week visit. I had been leaking water for several days, or I'd been leaking something for a couple of days, and I wasn't sure what was going on. So when I mentioned it to the midwife, she was like, well, it's probably urine, but let's go ahead and just do an amnio swab and see what's going on. Sure enough, it was amniotic fluid. At that point, she had requested to check me to see if there was anything going on with dilation or effacement. And I was dilated to a 5. I was 80%.
Whoa.
Yes.
Whoa.
I was 80% effaced. And the baby was at -2 stations. -2 station. And so she's like, okay, you need to go to labor and delivery. You're having a baby today. And we didn't even have a bag packed, nothing. And so we were in total shock. They were like, we're going to call over to labor and delivery, let them know that you're coming, but you need to go today. Your water's been broken for a little while. And so we're going to talk a little, or your water, you have a slow leak. It's not completely broken. You have a slow leak. And they asked me all kinds of questions about, did I ever feel a mucus plug come out, or have I been having contractions? And everything that I'd been having felt like Braxton Hicks. It didn't feel real, or it would go away for a little while. And so as we walked over to labor and delivery, we made all the calls. We called my mom, who was supposed to come in the following week because, again, at 36 and a half weeks pregnant, I thought I had time. And so she was going to come and be with me for the end of my pregnancy and be there for the birth of the baby. But we called her and just said, we're going to the hospital. We're having this baby probably today. You need to come in ASAP. And so my family lives in Pennsylvania. My mom somehow managed to make it out the next day. I don't even want to know how much she paid for that plane ticket, but she was able to be there the next morning. And so we walked over to labor and delivery. We told them that we were coming, or they knew that we were coming in. And I went into the labor and delivery room. At that point, Dave, my husband, had gone home to pack a bag because, again, we didn't even have a bag packed. And I still have a little notebook somewhere with like a list of things that I told him to give. And in my just kind of shock of the fact that I was having a baby, I gave him the whole notebook, and so I have the whole thing intact. It's not just a little piece of paper. But he comes back with all kinds of stuff. He had brought me a nursing tank top to wear. I had wanted to labor in this really long, stretchy skirt that I had found at Target. And I remember he came back with this, like, probably the most impractical nursing tank that I had. It had this little pretty white lace along the top. And I'm like, why are you giving me something with white lace on it? I'm having a fucking baby. There's going to be like blood and stuff everywhere. And so I remember wearing that. And while he was gone, so what happened was we called some really good friends of ours who just had a baby about 5 weeks earlier. And so we called them because, again, we don't have family in Texas. And so we called them and Dave said, Naya's in labor. I don't know what to do. And so I guess our friend Brian on the phone was like, he could hear the panic in Dave's voice, or maybe Dave told him. I don't know. I wasn't privy to that convo. But maybe Dave told him. And basically, Brian came to the hospital, picked my husband up, and took him to our house to pack stuff up, to take care of our dog, and all of that. And in the meanwhile, he dropped his wife, his new baby daughter, and his mother-in-law, who was staying with them to help with the baby, off at the hospital. So at least I wasn't sitting in labor and delivery alone. And I was like, oh, no, you guys don't have to be here. It's fine. It's fine. They're like, no, you're laboring. You're not doing this by yourself. And we were getting a hold of our doula, who was actually at another hospital with a birth that happened significantly premature. That baby was right around 28 or 30 weeks.
Wow.
And so she was assisting with that birthing situation. And so she's like, I will be there as soon as I can with this one, as soon as I'm done with this one. And so so I didn't labor alone. They were there with me for a while. And I remember being monitored, and you could see the spikes of the contractions on the monitor. And they're like, do you feel that? And I'm like, I don't feel anything.
What?
Yeah, it was wild. I think I was just in a state of shock that I didn't know I was having. I wasn't expecting to have a baby that day. We were going to go to Sephora, and we had our company Christmas party that night that we were going to go to. And that was going to be like our last thing that we did before we had kids. So all of that was going on. And then I remember at about 5:30, the midwife was checking me, and I was at an 8 at that point, completely effaced, completely dilated. Baby was at 0 station. Yeah, I'm pretty sure baby was at 0 station. And in the process of checking me, my water accidentally broke, or she accidentally broke my water. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I know that we didn't talk about this. This was not a part of your birth plan. I'm so sorry. I did not mean to do that. And I was like, no, I mean, it broke. You can't unbreak water. But at that point, that's when shit started getting real. And that's when I could no longer talk or walk or laugh through contractions. I really had to focus on the contraction and really let my body do what it needed to. One thing I learned with that birth is that I'm really in my own head with birth. I couldn't vocalize to anybody how I was feeling at one point. And unfortunately, there was a nurse shift at that time. And the nurse who came on was just like the worst. It's not that she wasn't supportive. She was just very, very old and very, very old school more than that. It wasn't her age that bothered me, but everything from like she would have to have me come to the bed, and she had to monitor contractions, and I couldn't sit. There was just too much pressure on my bottom. And so at one point, I remember I was laboring on the toilet because that was the only place that felt good. I was sitting on the toilet, and I started
that feels
making.
Good for a lot of women.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It just there's nothing that you can just kind of hang, and all that pressure that's there, there's no counter pressure pushing up against it. But it was really. That was the only place that felt good. But I started making kind of grunty noises on the toilet, and my doula had gotten there at that time, and she was helping us labor and all of that. But she was like, are you okay? I was like, I don't know. I just feel like I have to bear it down. And she's like, oh my God, you're getting ready to push. We need to get the midwife in here. We need to, and of course the nurse is like, ma'am, miss, we need to monitor you. We need to check your blood pressure. We need to check the baby's heart rate. And our doula was like, well, can't you just get a handheld Doppler and like like the old school blood pressure cuff and see what's going on there? And she was like, okay. And she was gone for what seemed like forever. But finally, the midwife came in with her and was like, oh, how are you feeling? I was like, I don't know. I feel like I have to push. I can't sit on the bed anymore. I can't talk anymore. It just hurts so much. And so the midwife was like, okay, let me check you. Let me see what's going on. And so she checked me. She's like, all right, well, I just saw the baby's head. So you're going to have this baby right now. And so she gloved up. They got everything ready. I got on the bed. I did have a completely unmedicated labor, which is what my birth plan was. So I did get the birth I wanted. But I had him out. I pushed for about 20 minutes, which is pretty fast for a first-time mom. He came out screaming, pinked up right away, great APGAR scores. And so despite being born 3.5 weeks early, there was no reason for him to go to the NICU. His breathing was fine. Blood sugar was fine too. I still remember the room went from me, my husband, doula, the nurse, the midwife. So like 5 people total. All of a sudden, this whole team of 12 showed up. And I guess because it was a preterm birth, they have to bring the NICU staff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, these people came in. When the baby came out, they hung out for 5 minutes. Once they saw everything was okay, they disappeared just as quickly as they came. Mm-hmm. And so it was a really fast birth. It was a really good birth. It was probably one of the craziest experiences of my life just because it happened so quickly.
How many hours total was that?
I think we got to the hospital at around noon, maybe 1 o'clock, and he was born at 8:20, so 7 hours.
Holy moly.
Yes.
That's crazy for a first-time mom,
For a first-time mom, yeah. And, just like every other first-time mom, I was told, oh, you're going to go over your due date. Your baby's going to be late. Nope, he was early. He was born December 10th. And so my husband, and my due date was January 3rd.
Oh, wow.
And so
he
Dave
could have been a Christmas baby.
Exactly. Well, I'm kind of glad he wasn't. But my husband was like, oh, he's daddy's little tax deduction. He just wanted to slide right in there before the year ended so we could claim him. And so that's what we did. We were able to get a TV with that tax deduction. And so my husband's like, yeah, that's Ethan's TV over there. That's why we got it, because of him.
That's funny.
It was a great birth. My doula, when I birthed for that one, I didn't want to be touched. I just wanted to kind of be left alone to labor and have my baby by myself. She was trying to do double hip squeezes or do some massage. Dave was trying to massage my legs and my shoulders. And I'm like, I love you, but don't touch me. Don't touch me. Just let me do what I have to do. It was almost like system overload and sensory overload where anybody touching me, my clothes touching me, all of that stuff, it was too much to bear. And so from what I've since read, that's really, really common for women to feel when they're in labor. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I tell clients, in prenatals, I always want to establish touch. So I want to have a conversation about touch. Mm-hmm. Are there certain types of touch that you know now that you don't like? So some people don't like soft touch versus firm touch, mm-hmm. Whatever. So we have conversation about it. But I'm always even though we're having this conversation and you're telling me the things that you like or don't like, it really could completely change in the moment. And I will know, you will let us know if you don't want something done and we'll adjust.
And we had this same conversation. I remember in my birth plan, it's like my doula will be providing some relief in the form of touch and this and that. And nope, didn't want any of it.
Oh.
So for my second birth, for my second son, a little backstory. I was diagnosed at 21 weeks and I think 2 days or maybe 3 days with an incompetent cervix, which, by the way, is the worst fucking name for anything ever. It's incompetent. No, it does its job a little too well, actually. But really, for those that don't know, an incompetent cervix means your cervix is starting to dilate prematurely. And it can, if it's not detected or caught, it can lead to basically a very, very early birth, possibly before even viability. And so at that point, it's like a second trimester miscarriage, which is awful. And they happen a lot because women don't know that this is going on with them. But I was diagnosed with an incompetent cervix. They gave me a cerclage, which are stitches in my cervix. They put 2 stitches in there, and I was on bed rest from 21 weeks up until 37 weeks. So 15, 16 weeks of bed rest. At home, thankfully, I did not have to go to a hospital, but I did have to get weekly progesterone shots. I was going to see the MFM, the high-risk OB, pretty frequently. I was not allowed to drive. I was not allowed to work. And so obviously that not only took a toll on me physically, but it took a toll on me mentally and emotionally. I was in such a state of hypervigilance throughout the pregnancy. And with an incompetent cervix, it's the craziest thing. I thought I was going into labor so often. We were going to labor and delivery really frequently. And they would monitor me and they'd be like, you're okay, you can go home. There was one time where they kept me overnight because I was contracting, but they think it was because I was dehydrated. I don't understand how that could have been possible because all I did all day was lay in bed and drink water. But with the incompetent cervix, it was like every twinge I felt, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. I'm going into labor. I'm going to have this baby too early. And it's like if you held your pee for too long, then you would irritate your uterus and you'd start having little Braxton Hicks or something was going on. And if you didn't drink enough, then you were dehydrated and you'd start contracting. And so I was just in the state of hypervigilance, and every ping and every pang that my body felt, I was like, oh God, this is it. I'm having this baby early. So obviously that carried over into postpartum, but I think we should have a whole other podcast episode talking about our postpartum journeys.
Yes.
But thankfully, I did exactly what the doctor said. I listened to every word. I laid down. The only times I would get up were to go shower once a day. I'd occasionally get to take the dog out, but I couldn't lift anything. I couldn't carry anything. And I had a 3.5-year-old at home at that point who wanted mom to pick him up and give him hugs and couldn't understand why mommy couldn't just come to school and pick him up and drop him off like she used to. And so obviously—
Did y'all have any support?
My grandmother lived with us at the time.
Okay,
so she was in her— she's still very much alive. She's 90 now, but she was in her mid-80s at the time. And so despite her age, she was what her doctor called a walkie-talkie. She had no problem walking, no problem talking. She was such a blessing to have in the house. She helped a lot with the cooking and the laundry and letting the dog out and helping take care of my son and all of that stuff. But she couldn't drive. So Dave would have to take time off work to take me to all these various doctor's appointments.
That's
and
hard.
it was really difficult. It was hard on our marriage because he felt like all of the household responsibility fell on him. And it literally did. I couldn't do anything. And he was, I know that he was really upset about it and really resentful about it. But at the same time, he's like, well, she's not doing this on purpose. It's not like she's doing it because she doesn't want to. She literally cannot if she wants to keep this baby. And so basically I carried my baby until the day before his due date, thankfully. The day I got my cerclage out, it just so happened to be 36 weeks and 4 days, which is the same gestation that I had my oldest at. And I remember the OB that put it in, or the MFM that put it in, was the same one who happened to take it out. And she's like, oh, you're 3 centimeters. It could happen any day now. And I'm like, no, it can't. And sure enough, it didn't happen for almost a month.
Whoa.
But I still took it pretty easy. Part of that was because I didn't have as much muscle really from laying in bed all day. Everyone was like, oh my God, you look amazing. I'm like, right, because I lay in bed. That's all I do. And so I was all belly. I was the thinnest I was ever at my life, which is crazy when you're full on pregnant. But every week that I kept that baby on the inside was a joy to me. It was a week that he was getting fatter. He was getting stronger. His lungs were developing better. And, at 28 weeks, I got the steroid shots to kind of mature lung development and things like that, just in case I did go into labor early. But our labor story is nuts. After I hit 38 weeks, I started getting pretty antsy. I'm like, look, I've had a really fucked up pregnancy. I'm really ready for this baby to come out. So I tried to do all the things to get the baby out. I did acupressure massage, full body massage with a prenatal massage therapist who knew acupressure touch points, the pedicures with all the stuff in the feet that they can do. So much sex that I was like, I don't even want it anymore. Just get this baby out. And nothing seemed to work. But I still remember it was my 39-week appointment, and I was actually 39 plus 6. And I was like, you know what? You can go ahead and check me. It's fine. I'm 39 weeks. Like, this baby's going to come in the next couple of days or next couple of weeks. And for weeks, I'd had a couple of false alarms where I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. The contractions are coming every 8 to 10 minutes, and they're steady and I can talk through them, but I know it's going to ramp up really quickly. And I would text my doula. She'd be like, okay, have a tiny bit of wine, or I would text the midwife on call and they'd be like, have a half ounce of wine, go get in the tub, go do this. And so I would do all the things that they'd say, and sure enough, they'd fade out. And it was really frustrating and disappointing because I was so ready to hold this baby. But for my 39-week appointment, I went in and she was like, do you want me to check you? And I was like, yeah, sure. So she's checking me and she laughed. I remember very vividly she laughed, and I knew exactly what she was going to tell me. She came up and she goes, you're 80% effaced. You're at 6 centimeters, but your baby is still up really high. Your bag of waters is in the way. You can either go home and wait this out, or you can go down to labor and delivery. We can break your water and we can see what happens. She's like, I'm giving you the option because I know it's been a really hard pregnancy. And this is with the same midwife practice that I was with my oldest. So they kind of knew my history. They knew how I birthed, which was very quickly. And so she's like, look, you can go home and, you can take some time to figure it out, or you can just wait for everything to happen on its own. But there's no guarantee you'll make it to the hospital on time. And I'm like, hey, that's a really good point. The hospital was like 40 minutes away, especially with traffic. And I was like, I'm going to go to L&D and I'm going to have them break my water. And she's like, are you sure about that? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. I'm ready to meet this baby, but I want to go home. It was my son's pre-K graduation, and I had to miss it. We had to pull him out because I was going to have a baby that day. Yeah. So we had to pull him out from the graduation. I still remember feeling super guilty, but they were like, no. And of course, he doesn't remember it. I had all the guilt, but
hey, well, it worked out. Oh, wait, was that his kinder? No.
It was his pre-K too, as well.
Yeah, so see, you missed,
I missed both of their pre-K graduations.
But it needed to happen that way.
It did need to happen.
It's fair.
It is fair. Yeah, that's right. I can't play favorites if I miss both of them. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go home, eat lunch. I'm going to get one last chiropractic adjustment because I'd been getting adjusted the whole time. And so we went and we did all of that. We went to labor and delivery. I was walking the halls like a crazy person. I was walking the halls repeatedly and I could feel the contractions coming on. But every time we stopped to get monitored, they would stop. And so I was like, I don't know what the heck is going on. And in the meantime, in the 3.5 years since the babies, this hospital had a tub in it where I could labor and I could deliver the baby. Moms who are VBAC moms or trying for a VBAC could labor in there, but they couldn't deliver. But at the same time, there's that loophole, like if you're having a baby and the baby's crowning, they're not going to pull you out and put you on the bed. So, but anyway, that wasn't my case.
I've seen you post pictures of this tub. It had like a door huge. And everything.
Yeah, it has 2 doors. It's got enough room for a birthing person and her partner to get in there, and their partner to get in there. I'm trying to watch my pronouns. A birthing person and their partner to get in there and labor and or birth in there. And so I knew I wanted a water birth. I was like, look, after this hell of a pregnancy, I don't know if we're going to have a third. So let me try and get the birth I want. And I had actually wanted to have a birth at home because I wanted a really minimal hands-off pregnancy. I ended up with the opposite of that. Looking back, I probably could have had a home birth, but it was fine. So we went to the hospital. We walked the halls all the time. Nothing was happening. Coincidentally, one of my friends was actually having her son in the birth tub. And so we were literally waiting for her to finish having her baby, finish doing her thing. They were going to clean it up, and then it was my turn.
Can you move it along in there?
Just knocking. We're waiting. But at one point while walking the halls, I saw her getting wheeled out to postpartum with her baby, and we joked that she tagged me in. I wish we didn't get a picture of that, but I remember getting super emotional at seeing my friend who also went through this pregnancy with having her baby. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, that's going to be me. I'm going to have this baby. And that's how I knew that I had made the right decision to go to the hospital. It was like a sense of relief, like all of this stress was lifted off my shoulders. So we get to the hospital room. They wanted to monitor me, and they monitored me for a little bit. They broke my water, and I had my first contraction right away. I would say within 2 minutes of having the water broken. And it was hard. I couldn't talk through it. I couldn't breathe through it. The bloody show had started. I had to go put on.
Shit.
Yeah, it was, he was
like
ready.
Instant.
Yeah, pretty much. And so I remember I had to go to the restroom and put on, the sexy mesh panties with the gigantic diaper pad and put all that on. And the nurse had to help me, and I had another contraction in there, and I couldn't talk through it. And then I came out and I had more, and my hips hurt and my lower back was killing me. looking back now, I know I had weeks and weeks of prodromal labor. So my body was doing something. It just wasn't very effective for whatever reason. But my doula was there. She was giving me double hip squeezes. Again, same doula from the first birth. So she's amazing.
And you were okay with the double hip
I was so okay with the double hip. I wanted to be touched. I was like, please, just whatever you can do to get the pressure off this lower back. So she and my husband were alternating doing double hip squeezes. At some point, I look up and I'm like, I really have to go to the bathroom. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I have to poop. They're like, you're going to get in the tub. So the tub wasn't even filled. It was like the water, there was maybe 8 inches of water in there. So not very much at all. Not enough to cover me in any way, shape, or form. But I'm in the tub and I'm birthing and I'm laboring. And this feels like hours to me. But it had been probably about 35 minutes since they had broken my water. Once I got in the tub, and maybe it was my body waiting for that kind of knowing that I was in the tub and I was in the place that I wanted to be to birth my baby, that it really started coming on one contraction after another. It was like a freight train and I couldn't stop. I remember getting into the tub and having 3 contractions. With the first contraction, his head came out. No, I'm sorry. The second contraction, his head came out. But the first contraction I had in the water, I think the rest of my water, and maybe not the rest of my water, maybe the rest of the bloody show, I think I might have pooped. I don't remember. I probably did. But that happened with the first contraction. The second contraction was the water, was his head coming out. And again, I'm so in the zone. I can't vocalize to anybody like, oh, his head is out. I remember him with his head out, but the rest of him still inside me, doing something with his head and like turning it, or I could feel it. And it was the wildest thing. And so in the meantime, the nurse and the midwife had left to go check on other patients because L&D was full. And they're like, we're going to check, if you need us, just push the call button and let the nurses station know. And so while all of this is going on, after I gotten in the tub, our doula was like, you guys need to page that nurse's station and say, we need the nurse and the midwife now. She's having the baby. While all of this was going on, they got me into the tub in such a haste that the waterproofing on the door was not put on right. So the waterproof part of it had not been activated. So once the water got up to the level of the door, it started gushing out into the room. My birth photographer and my husband were throwing towels down. My doula had a hand shower on my back, and I was having the baby. And so the midwife and the nurse walked in. The midwife was putting on those long gloves, and she's like, look at you having the free birth in a hospital. No sooner had those words left her mouth that my doula stuck her hand in the water and goes, here's your baby, and pushed him forward, and I picked him up. Oh. So I literally had a baby in a bathtub, a gigantic bathtub, in a hospital with nobody there but my birth team. And so it was like riding a freight train. Once he was out, I felt like I had no energy. I thought I was going to fall. They had me sit down. I probably got really pale in the face too, but it was such an intense birth. It was like holding onto a freight train for dear life. And so he came out and he didn't cry at first like my oldest did. He was just kind of like looking up and looking around and looking at me and listening to me talk to him. And I'm kind of rubbing his back and rubbing his head and trying to get him to pink up and cry. And finally he let out like one loud wail. And I still remember like hearing that, and everyone in the room you could see them kind of breathe a sigh of relief because he wasn't making any noise up until that point. And he was fine. And then, we were able to do skin to skin. I cut the cord. I joke with my husband. I'm like, oh, well, God, I birthed the baby and I cut the cord. Do I have to do everything around there? But we did that, and we didn't find out the sex of either boy. And so I was really excited. My husband was supposed to be the one to check and announce, but I was like, fuck that shit. I did all the hard work. I was like, oh, it's a boy. But then, and then they brought me out of the tub into the postpartum room where we could initiate breastfeeding. I had some trouble delivering the placenta, but they tried all kinds of things. And finally, I think the midwife had to like reach up and sort of manually extract
some
it.
Retained
I did.
placenta?
I had I actually ended up having a secondary lobe to my placenta, which happens in 1 in every 2,000 births or so. Whoa. It's called like a succenturiate lobe, I believe. I might have mispronounced that. But basically, I passed that gigantic thing when we had been home for 2 days. And I thought it was a prolapse. I thought I was dying. I thought I wouldn't live to see my kids, but it ended up, just a secondary lobe. I guess everybody was so busy looking at my cervix and checking that out and checking out all the other things that nobody was bothering to look beyond is the placenta attached? Is it blocking the opening to the cervix? All of the usual stuff. So that's part of my really difficult postpartum period. But the birth that I had with him, as fast as it was and as intense as it was probably it was the other most empowering thing of my life. Yeah. Just the fact that you listened to my body and I didn't try to fight it. And if it was going to push, I'm going to let it push and I'm going to let it do what it needed to. And so it was definitely a wild birth story, but,
how many hours was that from when they broke your water?
That was 40 minutes.
Holy shit.
I pushed through. I had him out in 2 contractions. I don't even think I pushed. I just read this thing about something called fetal ejection reflex. Mm-hmm. And it's basically like your body just pushes this baby out without you doing a whole lot to it. And reading that and going over some of the similarities of my birth, I can't help but wonder, is that what was going on with me? But I don't know. But yeah, my husband jokingly calls me a super birther because I'm, and with both of the babies, with the doula, we had her home by 11. So she was home at a reasonable hour. She could tuck her, she could snuggle with her husband or tuck in if any of her kids were up or anything like that.
That's funny.
We'll be back in a few weeks with part 2 of this 2-part episode. Thank you for listening.
If the Top Knot Squad's content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/TopKnotSquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
If you like what you hear, then be sure to click the subscribe button in your podcast app. While you're there, leave us a review. You can find us on social media. Just search for Top Knot Squad. We welcome your feedback and love making new friends.